Hi everyone, this is Terry Peer from the Chasing Giants podcast. Thank you for tuning in to episode 95. Before I play this episode for you, I just wanted to remind everyone that this podcast was recorded on December 10th, hours before the devastating tornadoes went through western Kentucky. Please keep those communities and families and friends in your prayers. This episode's going to run almost 2 hours, but it has so many great questions that we just left it as it is. I hope you enjoy it.
How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with this, and that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins, brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, episode 95, held live from Western Kentucky. I assume I call this Western Kentucky. I guess it's Southern Kentucky technically, but we are live in front of about 400 people. It's absolutely crazy that this many people show up to watch and listen to us.
I thought we'd be lucky to have 100 people when I was driving here today, and wow, I pull into this place with a giant building. What's it, 200 feet long? And
200 feet long. And
it's just packed full, and we certainly appreciate the support, and hopefully we can give them a good show tonight.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about why we're here in just a little bit. But before we get started, you kind of made this announcement to the audience before we started recording, but this almost didn't happen today. Right. You know, we both have a 4-hour drive here. I'm from northern Kentucky. You're coming from Illinois. You had a little bit of a rough morning.
Yeah, I did. I ended up in the emergency room this morning, and I know I've already told the audience a story, but I guess I ought to tell it again for the listeners. Otherwise, I'm going to get bombarded with phone calls and texts and emails. But for the last 3 or 4 days, I've had a really bad headache, and it got really bad last night. And then when I woke up this morning, one side of my face was numb. And I thought, oh, good Lord, I'm having a stroke or something. So I went to the emergency room this morning, and they ran some tests and such. And what they discovered was that there is a nerve that is between the vertebrae and the back of my neck that wraps around. Everybody's got one, or actually two. They come from each direction. They wrap around in front of your face. Well, one of those nerves is pinched in my vertebrae. And so it's giving me a headache on one side, and it's also making that side of my face feel numb. So I got to go in for some more tests in the next week or so. But it's not a stroke, which is great news. And I made it here on time, which is great news as well.
We were driving down this morning, and I got a text from your wife, and I thought, oh, boy. and my friend Austin is rode down with me, and I said, oh, he'll try to get here no matter what, but we're glad you're okay. That means a lot. That hope all those tests go back. So keep Don in your prayers on that. The reason that we're kind of here is our local dealer in this area, Brandon Beachy. We've talked about him and that giant buck that he killed earlier this year.
Right.
Yeah, he has a real world distributor or dealership down here and serves this community and has done really well for us. And we've gotten to know him pretty well over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I've got to know Brandon really well. In fact, we'll call each other on the phone, give each other a hard time, and joke around. And I won't mention those jokes here tonight because I don't want to embarrass Brandon too bad. But he's been to my house. He's sitting tree stands with me on my property. I've been to his place. I think this is probably third or fourth time. Just a great young man. Him and his brother Wes, they run Bluegrass Feed and Seed, and they move a lot of product down here. They're in Guthrie, Kentucky, right on the Tennessee border. And if you're looking for a source for real world products and you're halfway close to Brandon, get down here to Bluegrass Feed and Seed, and he can take care of you. In fact, he's taking orders tonight for products and giving a little discount too. But he usually has products on hand in his shop, so we really appreciate him.
So the other reason that this event is going on tonight is not only, he's hosting all of his customers and opened it up to the public. I think did I hear right that there's somebody from Florida here? Did I hear that right? You said there was like 3 or 4 states here of different people that's drove in for this thing.
Illinois, we got one from Illinois.
Indiana. So, but one of the things that's going on at this event tonight is there is a young boy that was born in this community named Kevin Yoder about a year ago and had a lot of issues, and he's out of the hospital now, but he had to have a lot of surgeries. And the community, this is what I respect so much about the Amish community, is they stand behind each other. With us starting this Lester's Feet thing and me dealing with the junk that goes on with our government, the thing that I appreciate the most out of them is they're not going to let somebody tell them what not to do to help somebody in their community. But this community rallied around that family and to pay the doctor bills for this little kid, and went to the bank and took out a note and paid that bill, and then the community's paying the note off, and that's what they were doing. So the people who were in charge of the food tonight did an excellent job, and they took donations. I'm going to ask that Jonai Miller come to the front up here just for a second. And Austin is my friend from Cincinnati. He's actually on the board of directors, he and his wife, of the Lester's Feet Foundation, which was actually a foundation that started kind of the idea from this podcast. And our foundation basically raises money through the outdoor industry and then identifies families with sick children. And a lot of times families can't work, and they have to take off work, go on FMLA, or they lose income, and their normal bills are hard to meet. So Lester's Feet will step in and help that family navigate the financial burden so they don't lose their house, they don't lose their car while they're taking care of that child. But it's really important to Don, myself, and the board of directors to recognize the Amish community, because of that fundraiser that we did last year. The Amish community really supported that. You guys in the Amish community donated a ton of money that's now being dispersed to all these families. As of July 16th, we've dispersed or committed almost $100,000 to families that have sick children. And it was really important to us to give some of that money back to the Amish community. So Jonai, if you'll come up here to Austin, on behalf of the donors and the board of directors of Lester's Feet, we'd like to donate $10,000 to your all's fund that helped little Mr. Yoder. And hopefully that'll help pay that note off. But just so impressive that this community would stand behind that family and go take out a loan and pay that medical bill. It teaches us a lot.
The rest of society could learn a lot from the Amish, and I wish they would. But we're extremely blessed to have an Amish following in multiple states, and we don't take that lightly. We certainly appreciate them.
Yep. So before we open it up to questions, outside of you taking a trip to the emergency room, I know you moved some cameras around this week.
I did. And
I saw a really cool story on social media. You went back to the the place you shot your first buck and sat down in the woods for a little bit.
Yep.
Talk about that a little bit. I haven't even spoke to you since I saw that.
You haven't. So, I'm always looking for the next giant that I'm going to hunt. And I'm telling you, when you start looking for bucks 180 inches and bigger, you got to cover a lot of ground to find them. And one of the last remaining goals, I guess you could say, that I have as a deer hunter is I want to kill a giant on public land. And so 2 days this week, I went and scouted public land. I put some cameras up. Believe it or not, I hope they're still there when I go back. But I shot my very first deer on public land back in the 1970s, in 1979 to be exact, November 16th at 7 a.m. if you want to get specific. But the year before, 1978, I was deer hunting. I was 15 years old, and second day of season. It was a Saturday morning. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I was sitting on the ground at the base of a tree. And there was a little rise in front of me, and on that rise was a rub on a cedar tree. And it wasn't long after daylight. I'm sitting there, and I hear something in the leaves, and I turn my head, and here comes an 8-point buck walking right up that rise, right towards that cedar tree. And I was shaking like a leaf, and I had my grandpa's old Remington 12-gauge shotgun, and I raised that shotgun, and the buck seen me raise it, and he locked up on me, and I fired, and I missed him, and he blew out of there, and I got discouraged because that was the first deer I'd ever seen while deer hunting. Well, this week I went back to that. I hadn't been to that spot in at least 20 years. And yesterday I went back, and the cedar tree with had the rub on it was no longer there. But I went right to the spot where I sit on the ground and sit there for a little bit. And the rise was still there in front of me, and I took a picture of that rise and posted it on my social media. But, one of the things that really struck me back from my thoughts yesterday as I sat at that spot was, my dad was never a deer hunter. He wasn't a deer hunter at all, but he always saved vacation time from his job to take me because I wanted to deer hunt. And that morning when I missed that buck, he was just, a couple hundred yards away, sitting in another spot. And, looking back all those years, 40-some years ago now, that morning, him and I we couldn't have dreamed of what deer hunting or where deer hunting would take me in my life. And I was just struck by how blessed I've been to have a father that took the time to take me deer hunting because that's what I wanted to do, not because that's what he wanted me to do. And, as fathers, we have a chance to really influence our kids. I think one of the biggest problems in society today is not ladies, it's men. It's men that's not stepping up to the plate and taking care of their families the way they should. And that's just something else that the society could learn from the Amish community. I mean, the Amish community does that. If the rest of the society did that the way the Amish community would or does, this whole world would be totally different. And and I was sitting there thinking about that. I'd probably sit there on the ground for 10 or 15 minutes at that spot where I'd sat as a 15-year-old kid and reflected on a lot of things. And, deer hunting, everybody thinks that all I care about is killing big deer. And shooting big deer is my passion. I put a lot of time in it, but deer hunting has become so much more to me. It's the relationships that I make along the way. I mean, the best thing deer hunting ever did for me was the people that brought me in contact with.
You met me through deer hunting.
I met you. I met Brandon. Just all kinds of people, good people I met through deer hunting. And that's the best thing deer hunting ever did for me, let alone the big bucks I shoot. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want to stop shooting big deer because I hope I got another one next year. So that's my story of the week. How about you, Terry?
I had one of my target bucks show back up. I made a little bit of a hint to this on last week's podcast, but he is back, and I will be driving home late tonight or tomorrow. There is nasty, nasty storms coming through pretty much everywhere tonight. Wind shifts to the west with a big temperature drop tomorrow. I think the high tomorrow is going to be, did I say this right? Is it low 40s tomorrow? I got 400 people in here looking at me. It feels like I'm at a zoo on the thing behind the plexiglass. But it was, I think, over 60 today, and I think it's going to be high 30s, low 40s tomorrow. So it's muzzleloader season in Kentucky. I'm going to be sitting out hoping, he's nocturnal right now, I'm hoping that temperature drop has him coming out to the food plots before dark tomorrow. But it's going to get hot again next week.
Yep.
So we got a bunch of people still with tags saying it's not over, don't give up. But this coming week sure doesn't look like it's going to be a decent forecast to be hunting.
No, it needs to cool off a bunch for that to happen. And, speaking of feeling like we're sitting in a zoo, I wish these people would start throwing food at us or something like we're a bunch of animals.
It's definitely, this is the part that I'm not comfortable with. Like, normally when we're doing a podcast, you're at your house, I'm at my house. The only difference tonight is there's 400 people in front of us and I'm fully clothed because usually I'm in the basement with my shorts on and my feet up on my desk. So
we don't want to see that, I promise you.
If you Google hard enough, you can probably find it somewhere, but I'm just kidding. So, all right. So we're gonna transition to questions here in a little here. So if people want to go ahead and start coming up to the microphone over on the your right hand side of the stage, we want to go ahead and get people. The first one's always the toughest. So we want all of our listeners that are listening online to also know that Don thinks he's getting set up tonight.
I'm getting set up. I promise you, people. Somebody's setting me up here. but I'm going to answer it anyway.
All right, so you don't have to say your last name if you're not. There's no switch on that mic. I'm going to mute it on and off after you get done. So we prefer if you just say at least your first name. If you don't want to say your last name, that's fine. But just where you're from, different parts. So go ahead.
All right, Derek Ford from Crofton, Kentucky. Guys, I appreciate what you're doing, man, with your Lester's Feet program. It's a blessing. Not many people get the platform you got, and even less use that platform for a purpose like that. So
thank you.
I encourage everybody to support that. We do. Everybody, all the listeners, I just ask that you support that. I appreciate it. But
thank you.
Here's my question. On Facebook a couple days ago, Don, you posted something about, I just left one of the best farms that I've ever been on.
It wasn't mine. I can tell you that.
I wish it was mine, but yeah, for sure, man. Can you tell us what it is that you saw and what it is that you look for to say something like that?
Boy, that's a great question, because I think you got about 80 comments as soon as you posted that saying what made it so good.
Yep, I've heard that several times since I posted that. I think that a lot of deer hunters don't recognize what a good deer property looks like if you're trying to grow big deer. Now, most people know what deer country looks like, a mix of ag fields and woods and diverse terrain and such. But when it comes to growing giants, it takes another ingredient. It takes isolation. You need a property that sits by itself, surrounded by open ag fields or open country of some sort, so you don't have people sitting in your line shooting all the little bucks. And also, those bucks, as they get older, they may move some during daylight, but they're not going to move off of the property very much in daylight. So in other words, he may move around within your cover, but he's not going to pick up and move across an open field a half a mile to the next woods in daylight. And that's what saves a lot of them. And my farm sets up that way, and I just happened to fall into it. When I started, I had no idea what a gold mine I had right there in my lap. But over time, it's become very obvious. And that was the big thing about this property that I'd seen, was there was probably about 100 acres or more of cover that was totally isolated. It was a half a section, so it was a mile long by a half a mile wide. So there was a road on three sides of it. The other side was nothing but open ag fields for at least a mile. And even when the deer had to cross the road, they still had to go. There was one place where they could have probably hit timber in about a half a mile. The rest of the places, there was two directions. I bet those deer had to go 10 miles before they hit the next tree. That's how open it was. And those isolated pieces really allow you to get those bucks to older age classes a whole lot easier. And the other thing was the way that property laid out. There were some pinch points and funnel areas within that 100 acres of cover. So I told the guy, I said, if you follow this plan, you're going to shoot a booner every year. And I fully believe that, because I can shoot a 170-inch deer every year on my farm. And that farm I seen was twice as good as the one I got. And I hope he follows the plan. I hope he's listening to this podcast, because he thinks I was pulling his leg. I went on and on about his property so much. But it was literally one of the best whitetail properties I'd ever seen.
All right, we got another question here.
Yeah, my name is Milton Yoder, and Alvin is actually my brother, so I want to thank you for the generous donation that you guys made. We really appreciate that, and I'm sure that will help a lot on paying those bills. So I grew up here. I'm from the southwestern Kentucky area. Yeah.
Walk around here for a second.
Let's see. There we go. That better?
Yeah, just don't twist that cord. I think
Okay.
there's a little bit of a short in it.
Right on. So yeah, I grew up here in southwestern Kentucky. Pretty much my whole life I've been here. I've been hunting for quite a few years and shot a few 150s and 160s. And so naturally my next goal is to shoot a 200-incher. And I've had to pass up quite a few smaller deer in 150s and 160s even that often end up getting shot. It's just deer hunting. It's how it happens. But I was wondering, what is your number one thing? You mentioned isolation a little bit ago, is what they need. But like between isolation and cover and food, what is the number one way to grow big deer other than those two things?
Stay out of your property. Human intrusion is the biggest killer of a deer hunting property. There's been more really good, fantastic, great deer hunting properties ruined by too much human intrusion than anything else. And, on my property, every tree stand or blind I got is right on the edge of the cover. I let the deer have the whole cover. Yeah, there's some great stand sites within the heart of that cover, but you go in and you start hunting those stand sites and putting pressure on the property, well, them deer, they just leave. If you're hunting the edges, you bump deer after they've become accustomed to your sanctuary, if you will, and you bump them, instead of running across the field a half a mile to the next woods, they run into the heart of your property and they stay there. And I tell my clients all the time that if you want to kill big deer consistently, you got to hunt them where they spend their daylight hours, and that means where they bed. And when you start putting human intrusion on your property, they're not going to bed there. If you're just one property over from where a buck beds, your odds of killing that deer are 10% what they are if you're on the same property. So you got to really cut down the human intrusion.
I was talking to Wes Delks this week, and he just bought a farm in Indiana. And this farm in the area of Indiana, it's known for people just kill everything, which I think everybody says that about wherever they're at. Everybody says, well, that's how my neighborhood is. But Wes bought that property. He shut down everybody that was in there. And he said he hasn't done one habitat project yet, but he said just staying out of there, the deer have piled in there from the pressure from everywhere else around it. So it's proof. I have no doubt that Wes, as talented as he is, as young as he is going to put a plan together. He'll shoot a booner on there in a couple years just because he's not in there tromping around. If you find a pocket that doesn't have that pressure in it, that's where the mature buck's going to be. It doesn't matter if it's an acre or if it's 30 acres.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, great question. But Wes was stoked about that because of just how many deer moved in just because he wasn't in there pushing everything around.
And, staying out of your property, it doesn't cost you a penny, and it doesn't cost you a minute of your time. It's the easiest thing you can do, and you don't even have to.
But it's the hardest for people to do.
It is, yeah.
All right, so we got another question here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming out. I was looking forward to it. I have a good friend of mine. He was wanting to be here, but he's still overseas. So I asked him if he had any questions, and he had one question on the bedding. We bought 100 acres, and we're trying to figure out where to go with the bedding. And his question was, do you typically do a south slope?
Well, I get these kinds of questions all the time, and every single property is different. And, I get people asking, do you put the food in the middle or do you put it out at the edge? You put the bedding cover in the middle? It all varies. And a south-facing slope is the place for your bedding cover because, in the wintertime, that's where it's going to be the warmest and where those deer want to bed. But without seeing the property, it's really hard to give specific advice for a property.
I appreciate you coming out. I think what would make your evenings getting a free pie.
That'd be nice. Yeah, for sure. Just throw it up here in the monkey
Did you
cage.
say it was your brother that couldn't be here? Your friend, is he in the military?
Oh, he was overseas, doing mission work.
Oh, well, that's
awesome.
even better.
Yeah.
Well, tell him be safe while he's gone.
Tell him we appreciate him, for sure.
Yeah.
The thing about people coming to us asking those kind of questions without being there, it's really hard. Mm-hmm. And the people that are starting with a clean slate, the one piece that I've heard you talk about when you're starting with a clean slate and you're saying, okay, where do I want to put my bedding? Where do I want to put my food? A lot of times you look at a property and say, where can I access? Mm-hmm. And then you'll lay out where the bedding and the food is based on where you can get in and out, not put the bedding and the food in and then figure out how to get in and out. Because access and that intrusion is so important. Figure out where you can get in and out of a property with different winds, and then you lay out your bedding and your food according to that.
Right.
All right. We got another question here.
I can introduce this guy. This is Joe Miller.
Joe and I had a talk as soon as he walked in the door.
This might be the one I'm getting set up on because I know Joe a little bit. So.
Yeah, we go back to the early 2000s. But anyway, I guess I thank you for the donation you made for us. And also I'm going to ask you about when we got the, let's say the 130s to 150s, 160s, and they're from even 8-pointers that, well, they've been killing 160s, 178 pointers on the adjoining properties. But anyway, we see another buck that might go 110, 120, a yearling, and don't see any white on the belly. But anyway, they're young deer, and then we shoot those, and we leave the cull bucks and we leave the nibbits. And then my question to you, Don, is what happens in 5-6 years if you kill those bucks out early in the season and those cull bucks and the nibbits breed the does? So where's your doe herd in 5 or 6 years? I mean, is there going to be any big bucks, or are all the doe fawns going to be bred like your nibbits? They can't produce, I don't think, but I'm going to ask Don, what's your thoughts?
Well, that's a fantastic question. It's one I get quite a bit too, because you know, I've raised livestock my entire life. Cattle, hogs, you name it. I got goats even. So
you have goats.
I got
Never
goats.
thought I'd see the day.
But so I've in my management of my whitetails on my farm, I've kind of taken some lessons that I've learned with the livestock and applied them. And you know, if a guy was raising beef cattle, he wouldn't go out there every year and he'd pick out the scrawniest, ugliest, worst-looking bull calf and leave him a bull and get rid of all the rest of them. But that's exactly what we're doing when we manage the wild deer herd in most cases. Because let me give you a perfect example. Let's say a guy is sitting in his tree stand and 2 3.5-year-old bucks steps out. And one of those is about a 150-inch 10-pointer and the other one's about a 120-inch 8-pointer. Well, you and I know which one's getting shot every single time that 10-pointer's getting shot. And one of the reasons I think for my success, and it goes back to the isolation of my property, is because several years ago we can't change the genetics of a wild herd. There's just too many of them going every which direction. We can't do anything to change the genetics. But what we can do when we manage a property is we can dictate which bucks in each age class are going to survive and move on to the next age class. And so what I've done is, like, say I've got a half a dozen 3-year-old bucks on my place. I won't shoot them personally, but I'll let my guests shoot the worst 4. And the best 2 get to become 4-year-olds. And then they get to be, if they survive, they get to become 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And I've done just the opposite. Well, I was actually, I forget what podcast episode, was it 61 when we had Dr. Bronson Strickland on? We had Dr. Bronson Strickland from Mississippi State Deer Lab on the podcast here a year or so ago. And I posed that question to him, and I told him how I'd been managing my farm. I said, does this make any sense at all that I'm shooting the worst bucks in each age class and I'm allowing the best to live to the older age class? And he says, not only do I believe in what you're doing, he says, I wrote a book on it. and I didn't have any idea he'd written that book. And but there's some merit to that. In most wild deer herds in this country, they're getting high graded, they call it. The best bucks are getting shot early, and the worst ones are getting to live to maturity. And I don't know what we can do about it, especially on a large scale, but if you're managing a farm, you definitely have some influence on which bucks survive and which ones don't.
Well, would that, if you do that, would that help your does to be raising better bucks? You know, what percentage of the pedigree do you think goes into does? I know the cattle industry's got a percentage, but what do you think is the percentage that you need in your does? I mean, are they 2/3 of a buck, or half of a buck, or a quarter, or what percent do you think? So we need good does?
Absolutely, and you know this from the captive side, and I think you're setting me up a little bit because you already know the answer. But at least 60% of a buck's antler genetics comes from his mother or the doe. And the benefit, that the way I just described how I manage my property, those best bucks in each age class, they become the ones that breed the does. Well, then their doe fawns becomes your doe herd. So it improves your doe herd as well as your buck herd. And I never dreamed that I could grow 2 200-inch deer on a 120-acre farm. And I've been able to do it, and both of those were killed in the last 4 years. But I spent 30 years building up to that point. 30 years of culling bucks and giving them the best nutrition that I possibly could to get to that point. Now, I don't have another 200 on the string yet, but my neighbors shot a buck a half a mile, actually it's probably more like 3/4 of a mile across open country to the next woods. I had a 2-year-old last year that had 15 points, and he had 200 inches written all over him in a couple of years, and he got shot by my neighbor. And that deer had been all over my farm all fall until gun season. Then he gets shot 3/4 of a mile away. But that's just a perfect example of deer hunters want to shoot the best, and they leave the worst.
So if you would have shot that yearling or that 2-year-old male, would you expect as many 200-inch deer if he wouldn't have bred your does to have good doe fawns out of that buck?
Well, Mel was a special deer because a lot of people see the picture of Mel and they don't believe he was 3 years old when he had the 216-inch rack. But I know he was because I watched him grow up. So, I'm not trying to raise 200-inch deer. Excuse me. But they just happened because of everything I'd done to raise bigger deer.
Now, James Kroll, he did a lot of studies, and James Kroll said that there's traveling bucks and there's homebody bucks also with does like that. So that's, I guess, why you don't have as much inbreeding in your herds, in the wild. But it's still, you still think that the best thing we can do is leave some of them 140s, 150, 10-year-olds, 2 years old, 3 years old. I mean, that's just, let's get that in our head and try to think that direction.
Well, absolutely. And, the thing of it is that Mother Nature's way of preventing inbreeding is these buck fawns disperse when they get to be about a year old. So one way we can influence that a little bit is research has shown that if a doe is alive and she had, say, twin buck fawns this year, next spring when she gets ready to fawn again, those buck fawns will relocate. And on average, they're going to go 5 to 15 miles from where they was born.
Maternal aggression.
Yep.
Is the term.
Yeah, the mother drives them away. But that same research, that same radio-collared research has shown that if that doe dies, her buck fawns stay home. So if you're going to shoot a doe with twin buck fawns. That's the moral of that story. Because her fawns will stay home.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you.
All right.
Hello, gentlemen. Alex Armbruster originally from Pittsburgh, PA, and transplanted to Waterloo, Illinois, and drove down here. I have a hunting property about an hour north of here where I have a chance to pursue these wonderful animals.
You going muzzleloader hunting in the morning?
Roger. If the wind doesn't destroy us.
Yep.
One thing I'd like to do is shout out to my son Eli, who shot his first deer on the first day or second day of the Kentucky gun season, and hopefully we have him hooked forever.
That's awesome. Congrats, Eli.
Then while we were dealing with that deer, this is leading to my question. We're feeding the Maximizer Plus mineral on that property, and we've started to put some food plots in. But I'd like to question you guys on your EHD, the Expect Healthy Deer technology, and if you've explored it to combat some of the other typical parasites that affect the deer herd, individually and as a herd. One thing we found, and it's a little bit scary, but we found a bunch of bot flies on the deer carcass. We were going to remove the teeth, and we had the head, and had a bunch of the bot flies just showed up. Mm-hmm. So just wondering what you guys have, if you've ever explored the enhancement of that EHD technology to support these herds.
That's a great question. One of the ways the EHD or Expect Healthy Deer technology works is it's got an all-natural insect repellent in it. And here's an analogy I can give you from my home farm. I raised, until a couple of years ago, I had a herd of all-natural grass-fed beef that I raised. And I wanted to be real careful about, what I fed them to keep them all natural. And the mineral that I give those cattle was the Maximizer Plus Deer mineral. And it was amazing when I started using that. Within about 30 days, those cows would come up to the water trough and wouldn't have a fly on them, where before there was several flies. And not only that, there weren't near as many flies on the farm. And one thing I really want to stress is I'm not saying that the Expect Healthy Deer technology, I'm not making the claim that it's 100% effective to fight EHD, or epizootic hemorrhagic disease. But I have no doubt that it's effective to some degree. I have no doubt it saves deer. I have no doubt it repels insects. So with that said, it's not specific just against the midge gnat that carries the virus that causes EHD. It basically is good for repelling all insects. Fantastic question.
I think one of the things that you really have to focus on, if you're going to take everybody always talks about mineral. Oh, I'm going to grow bigger bucks, and to be brutally honest, we're the only company that sells mineral that is going to look everybody in the eye and say, if you put this mineral out, you're not going to make that buck any bigger. The rest of it's just a lie. It's marketing that's just deceiving consumers, whether it's, apple flavor, lemon flavor, or whatever. They put a big buck on there and say, if you pour this out this year, you're going to turn a 150-inch deer into 170. It's not the way it works. You're improving the health of the herd. You're doing good for fetal programming. You're doing better for lactation. You're taking the stress off the animal that might help. But that genetic code's already written. We talked about that with Dr. Strickland. So the thing about EHD technology, it's the amount of consumption you can get in that animal. The more you can find ways to get it in the doe, into the buck, the better results you're going to have. If you go to Real World's website, there's a chart there that has every ingredient that's in that mineral and what that ingredient does. So like sulfur, for example, is in that mineral. When something bites it, a fly, a midge gnat, a tick, they don't like the taste of it, so they don't latch on to that one, right? But a doe that doesn't have that sulfur in her, you're going to have does all over her. So it's a matter of getting consumption up. So, that's why in bait states like Kentucky, finding ways to either mix a little bit of mineral with your feed or using the Maximizer Complete feed, getting more of that in their system, that way it helps fight it a little bit more.
I want to explain just a little bit about mineral and antler growth. What Terry said is accurate. If you can't just go out there and throw mineral on the ground and magically the next year your bucks are bigger. But what you can do, and Dr. Strickland has talked about this on the podcast, is it's called fetal programming. So you want that doe to get the best nutrition she possibly can before she gets bred, and all the time that she's carrying that fetus, she needs to get the best nutrition. And he talked about it as almost like a genetic switchboard where switches are being turned on and off by that doe to that fetus. And research in cattle has shown, beef cattle, you can go online and check out, do a search for fetal programming in beef cattle. And what they've proven is that those calves that are born to cows that got all the nutrients they needed, those calves they're going to grow faster. Their feed conversion, how many pounds of feed it takes per pound of gain, is going to be better. The health of that animal is going to be better. They're going to reach market weight sooner. And once a calf or a fawn, because Dr. Strickland did the same research with deer at Mississippi State, once they are born, there is nothing you can do to make up for what they did not get as a fetus. And that's why when a woman becomes pregnant, the first thing that her doctor wants to do is get her on prenatal vitamins, because you're setting that fetus up for life. Before it's ever born, you're setting it up for life. So with mineral, if your doe is getting every nutrient that she needs in the proper levels that she should be, her fawns are then set up for life. And I believe in that case, you can use mineral and other nutrition to grow bigger antlers down the road. But it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years.
I told my mom if she would have eaten better when I was pregnant, I would have made it to the NBA.
You was pregnant? Then where would we be today?
Instead, I'm hosting a podcast.
I just want to commend you guys for your support of those in need, and continue to grow with that, and look forward to every single podcast you guys put out. We listen to it every week, going to baseball practice, so that's something my son and I enjoy doing weekly.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. One of the things, one of our kind of our mottos, I think Terry came up with it, is we are here for the hunting community, not the hunting industry. You're going to find that especially me more than Terry, that sometimes I get brutally honest and just call it like it is. And one of the things that probably bothers me the most about the hunting industry is that some of the biggest names that have the biggest platforms have used those platforms for personal gain, and they don't use it to help others. And I'm just blessed to have Terry as a partner. We see things the same way, that God gave us this platform. God's opened doors for us in the hunting industry, and we want to use that to help others, not just to build up our bank accounts or something like that. And in the process, there's people in the hunting industry that don't care for us too much because of the way we speak the truth. But every time we go somewhere, we get a crowd like this show up, and we just I think we're on the right track, and we just appreciate all the support we've got for every one of you folks. So
well, I think that's the reason we've grown so fast. I think our other business ventures have grown as a blessing, because we've put other people first instead of saying every single thing being look at me. So we're not perfect, but we try.
Hi,
I'm Ricky from Arbondale, Florida. We're the ones from Florida.
Awesome. All the way up here.
Yeah. My question is actually about the does. I have an abundance of a doe herd, and when should I take the does? What part of the season would you say?
I think the question, instead of, and I get that question a lot, it's a great question. I think instead of when, the question needs to be where. And if you're in a state like Kentucky where you can feed, you need to have a feeder set up somewhere away from your main farm, like right behind the house, right behind the barn, where you can shoot right out the window. I mean, get them does away from the main part of the farm and shoot them. And then after that, it doesn't really matter when, but focus on those does that have buck fawns with them, because you kill that doe, and the odds are 90% based on research that those buck fawns are going to live their life right there where they were born.
Right, and that was, excuse me, that was also one of my questions, and of course you answered that, because I actually feel bad taking out a doe that has fawns, but can they survive well on their own at that point?
By the time hunting season rolls around, they'll be fine, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, even in Kentucky, they're pretty much weaned. Some of the spots aren't gone by then, but it's not to say some of them won't get by a coyote or something, but for the most part, they'll be fine.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, even not only the pressure going in and out and shooting, but that doe, if you shoot her back in your core area, you shoot her with a bow, she's going to run right back into your sanctuary. Then you're going to bust up, see all kinds of scent, leave all kinds of scent. So get them pulled away from your core area.
Yep.
All right, next question.
I'm Andrew from Monticello, Kentucky, about 3 hours east of here. I want to thank you for the podcast. When I learned about it, I listened to it quite a bit. I've learned a lot, and I enjoy the rambling around talk.
So are you the guy that's got the question that you're going to really set me up with politics or something?
Probably not.
Okay.
One question. Well, I have a question, and one is about broadheads. The question first.
I got an opinion about that one too.
Question first is, I've heard you talk about already here and there. You'll talk about you're looking for a property. Especially where I'm at, we're getting into the mountains. There is some open, but it's hard, especially looking at the wind. It's often very inconsistent. But looking for a property to buy, what is your input on the acreage, the amount of acreage? I realize not everybody can buy a bigger property. I realize that can be a benefit. Mm-hmm. But then also open percentage versus wooded, and what are things to look for in that, even the woods, the mature woods, or what are things to look for?
The number one thing to look for when you go to buy a property is not that property, it's what's around it, everything around it. If you can take 10 acres, and if it sits right up next to a 1,000-acre sanctuary where no hunting's ever been allowed, you put food on that 10 acres, you're going to shoot some big deer. As far as the layout, I mean, that's number one. I'm actually looking to buy a property right now, and I'm not waiting for them to hit the market either. If I see a property I like, I'm going to that landowner and saying, hey, you ever think about selling that? Because that's how hard it is to find a really good one. If a really good one hits the market, it never hits the internet, because those real estate agents, they've got a list of buyers. And there's a lot of buyers that know what a good property looks like, but what's really key, what's more important than what's on it, because you can change what's on that property. If it's wide open timber, we'll go in there and log it. You can make it thick in one summer. If it needs food, clear out a food plot and put a food plot there. But what you cannot change is what lays around it. What lays around the property is the number one key when you go to buy something.
One more question that I have is, when hunting, I had a buck that I was after. He wasn't by any means a monster for some people, but for me it would have been the biggest one. And listening to your podcast, I learned a lot about the wind and all that, the different things. And there were several decent ones that I was getting pictures of. And now this year, there's nothing, basically nothing. There's some smaller ones, but I kind of wondered if I didn't chase him off, maybe he did get shot. I thought I would have heard if he did get shot.
Well, again, without being there and examining the situation, it's hard for me to say. It could have been EHD that wiped out the big deer. It could have been dogs, neighbors' dogs. It could have been you. It could have been a whole lot of things. So it's hard to say, really.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then the last thing about the Broadheads.
Okay. This is the setup question.
I like to hear you ramble about it. I'm on our family.
Well, you're getting ready to hear it.
All of us have used Rage Broadheads.
Yeah.
I've heard people rambling about them not opening and this and that, and you've even talked about some of it. But we've never experienced it. And it's kind of interesting, some of the things that you talk about were the exact same things we'd say go with the Rage Broadhead, especially when you don't make a marginal hit.
Yeah.
You can ramble about it.
Okay, I will. You open the door and I'm coming through. A mechanical broadhead is a chance that you don't need to take. If you hit a deer in the right spot, you can hit a deer with a field point in the right spot and you're going to kill it. But I sure ain't going to take a field point to the woods. A friend of mine, you probably heard us talk about Ron Slifer, who has the bloodhound and tracks. I mean, this guy, if he gets two bow hunters that call him about tracking wounded deer, one guy's using expandable, one guy's not, he won't even talk to the guy with the expandable. He goes to the other guy because the expandable guy, he's probably, now if you hit them right, yeah, they're going to die. But there's so many, I mean, the list of reasons is long. They're just a wound waiting to happen. Mark my words, the day's going to come when you're going to hit a deer in the wrong spot in the shoulder. Did you see that video of Mel where I hit him? If that would have been an expandable, I wouldn't have found that deer. Guaranteed. I hit him right in the shoulder. I've shot more than one deer right through the shoulder blades with a cut-on impact fixed blade broadhead. With a mechanical, you don't get away with that. And here's the most lame excuse that I hear from everybody that wants to say, yeah, rage, use whatever. It's all about shot selection, they say. Well, no kidding. Everybody tries to hit a deer in the right spot. Every one of us. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen. And, yeah, you hit a deer in the guts with a rage, yeah, you're still going to kill him because you're going to put a big hole in him. But hit one in the shoulder blade with a rage and tell me what happens. Yeah, more often than not, it's going to be a giant buck. And as I've jumped on my soapbox about expandable broadheads, I've had hundreds, if not 1,000 people reach out to me and say, you're exactly right. I shot the biggest buck of my life with a rage. I hit him in the shoulder and I lost him. And it's going to happen. So keep taking a chance if you want. And if you keep hitting them in the right spot, you're going to keep finding them. But the first time you hit one in the shoulder, you're going to wish you'd listened to old Don.
The worst combination is a mechanical broadhead and a light arrow.
Exactly.
When you start looking at kinetic energy, that mechanical broadhead deploying, especially into bone, the kinetic energy on a light arrow goes back up through that shaft instead of kinetic energy into that shoulder blade. So if you look at that video, if you go home and watch that on YouTube of Don when he shot Mel, he was at 7 yards, 7 yards dead shoulder. Don's shooting the equivalent of a broomstick out of his bow. Okay, you could take this thing over your knee and not bend it. That's how stiff of an arrow he shoots and that thing did not penetrate into the other shoulder blade. Okay, so he's had somebody on his farm, and we're not going to mention who, but you've had somebody on your farm shoot a mechanical broadhead at a deer and it bounced off.
Yep.
It literally hit him square in the shoulder and didn't penetrate and fell to the ground in front of him. And the deer lived.
Actually, it's happened twice.
So
no names will be mentioned, Wes.
I tried to protect him.
I see a mechanical broadhead as a sadistic deer wounding tool. We owe it to the animal to kill those deer as quickly and as humanely as we possibly can. And if you hit them right, it doesn't matter if you're using a field point. And if you hit them wrong, you need every advantage you can get. I wish the mechanical would never have been invented. I think they ought to be outlawed. You go out to western states. There's some western states where it's illegal to hunt elk with a mechanical. Why? Because they don't penetrate. They're junk. They ought to go to the garbage heap.
Garbage.
Next question.
Garbage. We didn't even set you up with that. That was all natural right there.
You mean I got another one to look forward to?
My name is John Petersham. I live 2 minutes from here. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Appreciate that. I've got two friends that I really appreciate. One says, you see a 2 or 3 year old buck as an 8-pointer, he will always be an 8-pointer. If he's a 10-pointer as a 2 and 3 year old, he will always be a 10. Or will they grow more points as they get older? Your thoughts, please?
Fantastic question.
Yeah, it depends on the individual deer. I mean, if you see a deer with like an 8-pointer with a real smooth rack, there's no bumps on his tines or anything, he's probably going to, at 3 years old, he's probably going to stay an 8-pointer for life. A lot of it has to do with age. The older deer get, the more likely they are to have extra non-typical points. There's just really no way to know. However, on my farm, we cull out a lot of the 8-pointers, as many as we can, just because I've seen too many of them that remain 8-pointers forever. And you can only hold so many bucks on a property, and that's when you reach your limit, you've reached your limit. Some of those deer are going to get up and leave. And so, no, not always an 8. Once an 8, always an 8, and that's not true. And same way with 10. Once a 10, always a 10, that's not true either. They can add more points.
At 3 years old, though, you can usually see what the frame's going to be, and the brow tines are usually going to be very consistent from that point on. So if you got a deer with inch-tall brow tines at 3 years old, he's probably never going to have better brow tines than that. Yep. But there's a buck on my lease in Illinois that, you know, the more you study your trail camera pictures, the better you're gonna be able to make the decision. But there's a 160-inch deer on my place that I passed 4 times this year, and the reason for that is he's starting to he had all these little bumps. You know, they're not points, but you can, when you zoom in on that picture, you can actually see bumps on his bases, and then there's a couple back on his G2s. He's 160 now. So we're hoping that all of a sudden that's trash going everywhere in a year or two. So that's just a decision you got to make based on that. Yep.
Thank you.
He brought
this guy's got a notepad. That scares me.
Hi, I'm Matthew from Southern Illinois. Got a couple questions in regard to farming. Do you still have cattle?
I do. There's just a few, not many. I think I got 8 at the moment.
What about you, Terry?
None right now.
Okay.
I have a 16-year-old son. He eats about as much. He doesn't listen to the podcast, though, so I'm safe. His friends do, though.
So one of my questions is, you know, as a farmer, the first reason for owning land is for agriculture production. So, but we also enjoy using that land to raise deer and to hunt. Are those two goals, agriculture production and hunting, are those opposing goals, or can you make that work together?
Wow.
That's a great question.
You should write an article on that.
They can be opposing. And I would say most of the time they are, because a lot of the consulting jobs I go on, the landowner has an agricultural interest. Either he's a farmer or he's bought it for the farm income. And it really depends on the mindset of the landowner. And if his number one goal is deer and his secondary goal is ag, well, that's a whole different story than if his primary goal is income and his secondary goal is deer. Then it becomes a whole lot tougher.
So I'm coming at it from the agriculture number one, hunting, recreation.
Well, then it comes down to your deer hunting goals. Are you trying to grow giants, or are you just trying to grow deer to for meat, to put meat on your table? And in that case, you can accomplish both. But if you're trying to grow giants and also maximize income, you're going to have your work cut out for you.
Okay, so to try to strike a balance then, so I can't just, if I want to make money farming, I can't just give the whole farm to the deer. But how do I figure out, I guess I should ask it this way, what are the most important things that a deer wants? Can I give him the lowest hanging, how do I determine what the lowest hanging fruit is? Is there a way I can give him 20% and net, just use the 20-80 rule, that I can give 20% and reach the lowest, easiest to attain 80% of results?
Well, you say deer, are you talking, and you say he, so I assume you're talking about bucks, but what's your goal? I mean, are you going to be happy shooting a 2-year-old deer, or are you going to try to raise booners?
Well, I want mature deer, like 4 or 5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. That becomes a whole lot harder because a mature buck's number one desire is seclusion, freedom of human intrusion. And if you're all over that farm with your farming operation, and it depends on how much cover you got, really. If you've got 500 acres, but 490 of it's open, flat, tillable farm ground with not a tree on it, you've got 10 acres to work with, even though you own 500 acres. You could have a 40-acre tract that allows you to do more with the deer than that 500. It really comes down to the age of the bucks you're trying to raise. You're trying to raise mature bucks. You're going to find it, to do it consistently year after year, you're going to find it very difficult. How many acres you have?
80.
You're going to find it very, very difficult to do.
A lot's going to depend on the type of farming that you're doing, though. If you're raising horsers in a pasture that's going back through the woods, that's tougher. Out of the 7 farms that I hunt, 6 of them have row crop on them. But row crop is different. They're driving a tractor across the open ag field 4 times a year, plant, spray, and harvest, and then tillage. That's the 4 times they're back there. And the woods nobody ever steps a foot in those woods year round except for when I'm hanging stands, trail cameras, or hunting. That's a different story than if somebody's, running cattle on every acre of the property, if that makes sense. So a lot of it's going to be what type of farming you're doing too.
Here's something that I've thought often, and I've never said it before, and I'm going to say it tonight because of the audience that's here. There's a lot of Amish here. Each one of us deer hunts for a different reason. If you want to raise giant deer and shoot them like I do, it's a pretty selfish goal for your property. And the reason I said that is because a lot of my Amish clients, you go to their property and you ask them, I got a list of questions I ask all prospective clients, and you ask them, how many hunters do you have on this farm? And then they start kind of reading the family tree. Well, I've got my 3 sons, and I got my brother Joe, and he's got 2 boys, and sometimes Dad comes along. And it's the human intrusion. And I'm not saying that in a way to make fun of anybody. That's why I wanted to say it in front of a live audience, because I don't mean it in a degrading way whatsoever. I say it with all due respect. What I do is pretty selfish. And a lot of what you guys do is the camaraderie, getting together as a family. And that's what deer hunting is to you. And each of us has to make a decision on what our goals are. And there's no right or wrong. You don't have to do it my way. My way is not the right way. It's just my way. And you can do it totally different. Your goal may be that the whole family gets together, for a week during gun season, and we have a good time, and we introduce the kids to hunting, and we teach them ethics and how to respect the game and all that. There's nothing at all wrong. In fact, it's a great approach. But when it comes to managing for mature deer and getting to the point where you can shoot mature deer on a property year after year after year, you've got to really, really limit human intrusion. And if you don't, it's just not going to happen. And I'm just being realistic. I don't want to give anyone false hope. It's just going to be very difficult.
You wrote an article, and we've talked about it on this podcast, about profile of a big buck serial killer. It's really a loner thing. You know, outside of Don, I have one friend in all of my network that I would share a property with to hunt. One. Out of all the people that we've met over all these years working in the outdoor industry, there's only one other person that if a lease was open or we go to buy a property that I would trust to say he's dialed in the same way. Besides him, there's two guys that I know that I would ever hunt a property with. So to do this, it's very lonely. You know, you don't have that type of environment. He's right. It's almost selfish. If we want to take a kid hunting, I got a whole other property that I take them to do that stuff with.
If I could expand on that just a little bit, I was blessed with two daughters. And so they don't really have, one of them has zero interest in deer hunting and the other has very limited. If one of them would have been a son that had a lot of interest in deer hunting, I wouldn't have the deer on the wall that I do. I think I mentioned my dad was not a deer hunter. Well, I'm the only deer hunter in my family. So I don't have that same connection that some of you guys have with others in your family that like to deer hunt. And it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's a blessing because I can manage my farm however I want to, and I don't have to tell Junior he can't shoot this buck. But it's also a curse because I don't have the family to share it with. You know,
the time's going to come with those two grandsons of yours.
Yeah, I've got two coming on. That my days are numbered. But I didn't ever want to. I've always thought this: how is the best way for me to say this to the Amish? And I never wanted to do it on the podcast with just me and Terry on the phone because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. Because I have the utmost respect for your lifestyle and how close knit your families are, and doing it here in person. If you guys want to tar and feather me afterwards, I'm here. So, but I hope
back
that
to the
makes
emergency
sense.
room tonight.
Got one final question yet for you, Don.
Okay.
So, do deer dislike livestock, cattle in particular, or is it just do they get along fine with cattle, but if the humans stay out of it? I'd like to hear you talk about how you manage your farm during the time that you did have livestock.
Well, when I had the cattle, I rented another farm down the road that had a lot of pasture, so I kept them totally separate. However, I will say this, about, 20 years or so ago, I hunted a farm that, it was a cattle farm, but the cattle were off of where I hunted most of the year. The guy owned the whole section, road to road to road. And there was a fence all the way around on the roadside. Now, he would summer his cattle somewhere else. And a lot of that section had ag fields in it, corn and soybean fields, and it had a couple little creeks that went through it. Well, what he would do is in the fall, after all the crops were harvested, he would turn his cattle in for the winter in that entire section. So they would run the deer woods where I was hunting. And what I found, and I've also experienced this on other properties, but what I found is that deer do not particularly like cattle. If they had their preference, they would stay away from them. But when a big buck is looking to get away from humans, if there's a cattle pasture that's got like some multiflora rows or other thick, pockets of cover within that cattle pasture, a mature buck will absolutely get right in the middle of that stuff and put up with them cows. So hope that helps.
The government tells us that a whitetail is less likely to catch COVID from a cow than a horse. So I think that they prefer cow pastures over horse pastures.
Well, our government's out of control, so we'll move on to the next topic before I get fired up again.
Name's Philip from Wisconsin.
Wow. You came from Wisconsin to this thing?
It just happened that I had a ride down here. So.
Oh, wow. Thanks for coming.
One thing I never heard mentioned over about a year and a half of listening to your podcast was coon hunting. How does that come into human intrusion, being it's at night?
I've been on a couple of rants about it.
He listened to the wrong podcast.
Yeah.
Well, it must have not been in the last year and a half.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
The number one worst thing for a hunting property, worse than human intrusion, there's only one thing, and Joe Miller will tell you this too. There's one thing a deer hates is a dog. I absolutely will not tolerate a dog on my place. Whenever I had captive deer, there's captive deer in the pen. They would see a coyote going across the field, and they'd stand there and look at it. They may flare up their tails, and just watch that coyote go across the field. But you take a little Chihuahua dog that's this big out there in the yard, them deer will flip out. They'll bounce off the field. They can tell the difference between a coyote and a dog. I guarantee you there is nothing worse than a dog on a property. Nothing. I don't care if it's at night with a coonhound.
Well, that's what I was going to ask does that make any difference being it's at night? And you just answered that. So
yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple years ago,
We have any coon hunters in here?
A couple years ago, when I went off on a rant on this, I pulled trail camera cards, and there was a guy with 2 dogs. I don't even know why I had it on video mode, because usually I don't run my cameras on video mode. But I had video of 2 guys basically walking down the middle of my food plot into my sanctuary with their collars looking for their dogs. And come to find out, our local county coon hunter association had a tournament that night and literally drove everybody around the country side. And they had permission to hunt certain properties. Well, they let the dogs out. The dogs don't know the property lines, so I went nuts. I called an attorney, and we sued the local coon hunter association, or threatened to sue them. They don't have the rights to do that. I went on a big old rant. That was before the neighbor's cattle got out. I don't like coon hunters. I hate coons too, so don't get me wrong there. But
Joseph Beachy from Guthrie, Kentucky here, and I heard that you turned captive deer loose to hunt, and I was just wondering if you cut the deer tags off before you turn them loose.
Now I'm being set up. Yeah. Uh-huh. I knew that was coming. Yep. Yeah. You guys listen to the podcast can't see this, but Terry's handing this guy a $100 bill. Hand it over. You're not getting off cheap.
That was fun.
That is a rumor. Yeah.
But you do cut the ear tags off.
That is the rumor. Yep.
Oh, that was worth the 4-hour drive down here just by itself.
I'm Richard Beachy from Arthur, Illinois. There's a guy in our area that I work with, or used to work with quite a bit, and he tells me that there's only one reason that Don shoots booners every year, and that is because he sits in his office chair drinking his coffee, watching his phone on his cell cameras. When he sees the booner walk past his trail camera, when he knows in what area he's in, he'll run out in his stand and be there ready for him.
If it was that easy, everybody'd have a wall full of booners first. That's my first comment. My second comment, I had one cell camera last year, and I have several this year because I've got a farm in Iowa I'm hunting, but everybody's got an excuse for why somebody else succeeds and they don't. And it doesn't matter what you do in life. You can be good at playing checkers, and somebody's going to come up with a reason of why they're terrible at it and you're good at it. So it just comes with the territory, and everybody's got an excuse. And it's probably a guy that I've never met before, and I probably don't even know his name. It doesn't matter.
How many cell cameras do they sell, and how many booners are shot?
Well, this guy hasn't shot a buck over 160 inches.
And he's got 15 cell cameras, doesn't he?
Well, he told me he's got at least 10 of them on his property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why doesn't he have a booner?
Well, I'm not sure. He just lives around the corner from you. And
from me?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, it's about to get real here. It's about to get funky in here.
He's down in your area.
And me need to talk when this is over.
So
why doesn't he shoot him? If he's living in the same area as I'm living, he's got the same opportunity I've got. Why isn't he shooting him?
I didn't pay this guy, by the way. I hadn't talked to him
I'm
yet
glad
tonight.
he stepped forward. Actually, I know him. You worked for me, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he worked for me when I had the tree business.
I get you.
So my question is, so if he says that you sit in there and watch the deer go past your trail camera, and then you go out to shoot him, so if your buck is when you're shooting a mature buck or hunting him, so you're hunting him when he's checking his bedding area before he goes in. Are you saying that the buck will go around the bedding area, checking the wind, and then stay away long enough for you to slip out, get into your stand, and be there when he comes back so you can shoot him?
Well, you know what? You need to tell this guy that coffee's at 7 on Monday morning. He needs to show up.
You don't drink coffee. What does this guy know?
I don't know. We'll be finding out who he is.
I can tell you this. When is this? December. When was the last time I was up there hunting?
December 10th.
So the week before Thanksgiving, I was hunting Don's farm after a specific buck that he once shot this year that I actually wanted to shoot. And he did get a cell camera picture of the buck that I was wanting. And I sat out there for I don't know how long and never saw the buck. So if it was as easy as monitoring cell camera pictures, it'd be, I don't know. Good grief.
All right, I'm going to just use my first name because if I use my last name, it could be trouble. But
there will be no depositions as a result of this podcast.
This could be bad. Uh-oh. I'm Chuck.
Yeah, everybody waits until the end to bring the good ones.
I'm Chuck from Mumfordville. I was sitting over there thinking about asking this question, but since you actually brought it up by name, how do I kill my wife's chihuahuas without getting a divorce?
Well,
is your wife here?
No.
Is your wife here? Does she listen to the podcast?
No.
Does any of her friends?
There might be somebody here, so I didn't use my last.
Does any of her friends listen to the podcast?
I don't know.
Okay.
I won't say for sure if I got any firsthand experience in this area.
You cannot confirm or deny.
Exactly. What I would do if I was you is I would take my wife on a trip to Florida and just wine her and dine her while you're down there. And put your buddy up to doing it while you're gone.
Well, you know, I had a neighbor on the way down here volunteer to do that for me.
Yeah, well, it's going to be that trip to Florida is going to cost you.
Not as much as a divorce.
That's absolutely true. Yep.
Okay, that'll work.
Yeah. Good luck. If you pull it off, let me know. I'll write an article about it.
That was funny.
Hey, Don. This is Roman from Tennessee. Glad you're here. Appreciate your donation. I love watching your videos and reading your stories. I appreciate what you do. Question I had asking for a friend. He wondered if you all use Tacticam Reveal cell cams and what you think of them.
I've never used them, and there's a. What are you laughing about?
Thinking of the two ways this answer is going to go, and both of them are funny.
I have never used them, and let's just say I don't have any faith in a $100 camera. You get what you pay for.
Okay. He just wondered if they're too cheap if you don't. So.
Well, I think you get what you pay for, and the electronic components in them are just not going to last. And I've had people rave about them, but the thing about it is with a trail camera, you can ask this audience, what's the best trail camera out there? And I guarantee you there's going to be 10 different answers. This guy's going to say Browning. This guy's going to say Reconyx. This guy's going to say Tacticam. Next guy's going to say Covert. Next guy's going to say Cuddyback. And everybody's going to just know that they're right. They know they're – but how many of them have ever put those side by side? My favorite is Reconyx. They are the most expensive. But I started using Reconyx in 2010, so 11 seasons. Every Reconyx I've ever bought, I'm still using today, or it got stolen. If I still got it, it's still working. I don't have a pile of junk cameras. If you divide the cost of that camera over just, say, 5 years, Reconyx is the cheapest camera out there. You'll still be using it 10 years if you still got it. Nobody stole it. And these other cameras, they're one-season cameras, and they're junk at that because you put them out there next to Reconyx. I guarantee you, I've done it. You're going to get probably less than 50% of the pictures. Half of the deer that go by, you're not even going to get a picture of, and you're not even going to know it. And I don't care what brand you want to compare it to. I've compared it with a lot of different brands. So, and Reconics is not a sponsor in any way, shape, or form. I wish they were. I've tried to get them, but for whatever reason, they won't do it. But the only reason I'm using them is because they're the best, and you just can't take a chance on missing it. When you're hunting deer that are 180, 200 inches, and you're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, you cannot have him go by your camera and not know it. It's just that important. So I've never used a Tacticam, though, so I'm not bashing them. I'm just lumping them in with all the other $100 cameras. You're welcome.
Do you want me to answer it? I can actually answer that question.
Well, I think I've already made the hunting industry mad enough tonight, so why don't you jump in?
For example, if you want to get into the bill of materials of that camera, the entire fixed cost of that camera to manufacture is less than the photo sensor cost. Only the photo sensor, not the lens, just the sensor that depicts and detects the animal walking by. The entire reveal camera costs less to produce than what the Reconics photo sensor costs to put in their camera. So when you're talking about the race to the bottom on a commodity camera, it really doesn't matter. I have not used the second generation. I've used the first one. The first one had a problem with water intrusion. The gasket around the outside of it was a little shady. I think they did address that a little bit in the second generation. But I think here's the thing. If all you can afford is $100 camera, it's better than nothing. But if it's Don and I, we don't have unlimited funds. It's not like, we can go just buy anything we want. We just save our money and buy the best we can when we can afford to do it. It's just you get what you pay for.
And when you ask a question here, you're going to get the brutal truth.
We've turned down 3 and not product sponsors, 3 paying sponsors for this podcast.
Trail
cameras. Just because we don't believe in them. We would rather pay to use what we believe in than take money and get free stuff and a check for mentioning them on this podcast. So we've turned down 3 of them just because of that. Oh, sorry. You ready now?
Are you? I'm Marcus Beachy from Arthur, Illinois. And this question is for Don, I guess.
Well, brother set me up, so you might as well too.
I guess don't take it the wrong way, but a couple episodes ago you said something about when the neighbors shoot a deer and they run over on your property, how you're supposed to treat them. Mm-hmm. Then you said, well, it all depends where they're hunting. Are they hunting on your property line or where they're hunting? And on the plan that you put together for us, you put 3 stands right on the property line. So my question is, how do you know if it's okay for the neighbor to hunt on the property line or yourself?
Well, a lot of it depends on the layout of the property. For example, the issue that I've had is I've got a neighbor that's got 5 acres. And that 5 acres includes his house and his yard.
About 10 trees.
Yeah. And he doesn't deer hunt, but he lets everybody and their brother deer hunt. Or he did. So every deer they shot came off of me onto him. And when they shot him, what happened? They ran right back into my sanctuary and they ruined my hunting. So here's a guy that doesn't even hunt, and his actions are basically destroying my farm for me. Well, I put a fence down that side and he's not a problem anymore. But I get what you're saying. You paid me to come and give you the best advice. I can only assume what's going on the neighboring property. And I told you where you need to be for your best chance to kill a big deer. Now, if you got a neighbor that's doing the same thing, then maybe you need to get with him and neither one of you set that line. But if you've got a neighbor that's just, he's a cattle farmer or he's whatever, and he has no interest in deer hunting, then you need to be on your line just for a scent reason, because you don't want you want to give the deer as much of your farm as you can free of human intrusion. And you don't want to penetrate the heart of your farm to hunt, to put tree stands up or whatever. You need to sit back on the edge. But as far as what property lines you got to set, you need to work that out with each individual neighbor. You might, that's a pretty big property that you was on or that you guys owned. You probably got at least 4, 5, 6 different neighbors that touch it.
At least that.
Yeah, at least. So you need to work that out with each one of them. But I'll stand by what I said. You need to treat each neighbor the way you would want to be treated. And if you don't want him sitting on the line, then you need to move off of that line too. But when it comes to the plan I designed for you, I did that because I was giving you the best odds based on what I know to kill good deer.
The second question I got is if you're walking out to your stand, do you use a light or do you try to walk out without a light?
I almost never use a light going in or out in the dark. And I'm not saying lights are bad. In fact, sometimes when I'm stumbling through the brush and taking a briar to the face or whatever, I'm probably thinking I'd be better off with a light so I could miss some of that, but it'd be a lot quieter anyway. But I just don't. But I don't think it makes that much difference one way or the other.
The thing that I seen is the one stand we got to walk past the food plot, and if I walk without a light, I'll have deer blowing at me when it's dark. But if I use a light, I can walk within 30 yards of me, and they'll just stand there and watch me go and won't do anything. So I didn't know what a light really does to them.
Well, that's interesting, and I can't say for sure, but related to that topic, you've seen the red and the green lenses for lights, supposedly so the deer don't see it. Well, I can tell you for certain that when a trail camera lights up with that red glow, the deer can see it. And if they can see that little red glow, I think they can see a red or a green light because it's so much brighter. I know that's kind of off the topic of what you're saying, but I don't use them, but I don't see anything wrong with using them.
I think you should paint your face with some of that black face paint, and then it doesn't matter.
Well, I think they can still see the silhouette of a woman from a
not with
human.
face paint on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the podcast. I enjoy and listen to it every week. So.
Well, thank you. Glad you made the trip from Arthur. Tell your brother he ain't getting out of here until he tells me who my neighbor is that's mouthing off about me either.
I'm Eric from Salem, Indiana, and I never heard you talk about this. I was wondering how you, this last season, on all the properties I hunt or around it, there was a bunch of standing corn, and I was wondering how you, I mean, I couldn't really do anything because the deer were just in the corn. How do you hunt it, or what can you do if they're in the corn, and do they like to live in bed in the corn more than like in woods or whatever?
Well, I don't think they like it more than woods for bedding. But one thing about it is there's a whole lot less human intrusion in the middle of a cornfield than there is in the middle of the woods in most cases. So especially the older mature bucks, they figure that out in a hurry. It makes it a lot harder to hunt those deer, but still the edge, a whitetail's an edge animal. And, you know, you look out across the cornfield, it looks like, well, it's all corn. You know, one little spot's as good as another little spot, but actually, you know, those edges, a mature buck is more comfortable following or traveling and standing corn than he is a picked cornfield. They just like that cover right up against their sides. So I get what you're saying. Standing corn's definitely a disadvantage, but you know they're going to still use the edge as if that they would with that field is cut. So that's how you go about it.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think it helped me, but this last season I kind of changed my mind. And then I was wondering if we have there's a swamp across the road from our property, or where we live, and I can totally, there's nobody ever goes in it. I mean, I can control who goes in it, and I know some deer, you know, live down there, but it's just a couple acres. And I was wondering, how can you hunt that without spooking them out? Like, do you go in the morning before they come back in, or
how do you hunt a small area? Or
I actually don't hunt it, but there's a big swamp with some trees and weeds around it, and then there's a small waterway with another patch. And we see deer down there sometimes, but I don't hunt it because I just don't know how you would hunt it without spooking out the deer.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, you described some of the areas that I hunt, the properties I have permission for. I am so convinced that human intrusion ruins a property that I would rather hunt 2 acres to myself than to have 200 acres and share it with one other hunter, because I just assume that other hunter is going to hunt it wrong. He's not going to watch the wind. He's going to stomp through the heart of the property. He's going to run mature bucks out for the most part. And so these small patches where I am hunting, there's a couple of critical things. First of all, you want to get your stand in way before season. And I'm not talking middle of summer. I'm talking like right now. Go in right now and hang a stand without any intentions of hunting it till next year or this winter before it greens up in the spring. Get your stand ready. Figure out where you need to be on that little spot. Get your stand ready and then just stay away from it until the day you hunt. The day you hunt, you need to be very specific. You need to know that a mature buck is using it. And then you need to know how he's using it. How's he accessing it? How's he getting in there and how's he getting out, the route he's taking? And wind. Is he not moving in until hunting pressure pushes him in November, or is he there the first week of October? So you got to put all those pieces, because and the reason I say that is because it's so easy to burn out a small property. If he's not showing up till November, you can burn that out before he ever shows up. You think, well, how's he know? Well, the other deer somehow communicate it to him. You bust does out of there, and they're not coming back either if you do it a couple times. So the element of surprise when you talk about hunting mature bucks, there's a theory that the first time on stand is the best time, and I absolutely believe that. So you get that stand ready, and then you wait for the right time. And the Joey buck I shot last year is a prime example. I put tree stands up 2 years before I ever hunted them. The first day I hunted them, I shot the deer I was after. But it took a very specific set of conditions. I needed some hunting pressure to push that deer in there. So I waited till after our gun season to even think about hunting it. And then I needed a southeast wind. Well, it just so happened that the year I wanted to shoot the deer, 2 days after gun season ended, we got a southeast wind. I go and I kill him within 15 minutes of daylight. And yeah, there was a good bit of luck involved with that. But the key here is my stand was ready to go 2 years early. And I've got a lot of stands in the woods right now I've never hunted yet. But when the time is right, when a mature buck shows up at that spot, I'm ready to roll. I slip in without him ever knowing that I was there until the morning I show up, and then it's too late. So you got to, and the other thing is, as you get into season and the leaves start falling off the trees, a lot of times those deer, if you got to access across an open ag field, those deer see you coming. So you can't, afternoon hunts are out. You got to, if they can see you coming, you got to stick with morning hunts, get in there in the dark, get in there plenty early and be waiting on him.
So you're saying I should basically get some trail camera data, like when they're using it, so the years before then go in, because I can't really. They do a lot of stuff at night. I can't see what they're doing. I have to get a couple years of figuring out how they do it before I go in.
Right. Trail cameras are the number one game changer. I've been deer hunting. This is my 44th year, I believe. And in that 44 years, the biggest game changer that I've found is a trail camera. It's made killing big deer almost easy. But the thing of it is, I think most guys are using them wrong. They're trying to go out there and check that camera, and they're looking through their pictures, and this buck, he was moved in daylight 3 times last week. Well, yeah, you're a week late. What they need to do is take that data, those dates when that deer was moving in daylight, the wind direction that he was moving past that camera, and they need to file it away. A year from then, that same week, say whether it's the first week of November or the middle of October, whatever, that same time period the following season, they need to be waiting for that specific wind direction, and then they need to be in there waiting. Instead of being a step behind the deer, they need to be a step ahead of him. And I think that's how most people misuse trail cameras. They're a step behind. They check their card. He moved last week. Now I'm going to go hunting. Well, you're too late. And the way I do it is I'm using that annual data that I gathered last year to tell me what he's going to do next season. And then I'm setting my stands in place and I'm ready when it happens. And then that's what you need to do in a little spot like that.
Yeah.
I'm Keith from Clarkson, Kentucky. Mechanical broadheads. If fixed blade broadheads were outlawed by Joe Biden, would you continue hunting using mechanical broadheads, or would you quit hunting?
You know, did you pay for him?
I did not, but this is fantastic. I love this.
Is Joe Biden your president? He's not mine.
Would you break the law, Don?
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me if he'd do that too. Well, that's a good question. You know, I probably would have to quit. I'd go to spear hunting.
Yeah, Don would turn into a spear hunter, or he'd try to jump out of the tree on the deer's back, break his antler off, and stab him with it or something.
Use a blowgun?
Yeah.
No, that's cruel too. I don't know what. You know what? It wouldn't bother me one bit. It wouldn't bother me a single bit if bow season became traditional archery equipment only. It was everybody had to use either a longbow or a recurve. Everybody had to, I don't even care if you had to make your own bow and make your own arrows. It's become a joke. You know what the crossbow is? We're going to get on to another topic here. You know the whole society's trend towards everybody gets a trophy? Everybody gets a trophy. You know, it doesn't matter if you're the worst kid on the whole league, you get a trophy. Well, that's what a crossbow is. Everybody gets a deer. Here you go. You get a deer, I get a deer, everybody gets a deer. You can't do it with a recurve, let's use a compound. You can't do it with the compound, let's use a crossbow. Next thing they're going to do is they're going to allow rifles in bow season. What archery season was not meant to be a game management tool. And this year in Illinois, for the first time ever, the bow harvest is going to surpass the gun harvest. And you know why? It's because of the crossbow. And it's just the whole trend. It's not just bow hunting, it's society. Bow hunting is just what we're seeing in bow hunting is what we're seeing in society. Easy, easy, easy. How can we make it easy? And trail cameras should be right there with it. And I'm the guy that uses trail cameras as much as anybody. They ought to go in the garbage. Compounds ought to go in the garbage. Crossbows ought to go in the garbage. And mechanical broadheads, they ought to be melted down and used for anchors.
Just imagine Don in a loincloth stalking an animal with a spear. That's where he's heading with this.
But hey, we're not going to go there. Society is not going to allow it. Everybody's going to get a trophy. So I've had guys hunt my farm with mechanical broadheads, and I never said a word to them. I've had guys hunt my farm with crossbows. I've never said a word to them. It's a personal choice, and I don't expect anyone here to jump on the Don bandwagon and say, "Yep, we're all going to whittle our own bows out of hickory sticks or something." That's just my opinion. I respect the opinions of this young man that likes to rage broadheads. I'm fine with him. I'll shake his hand afterwards and wish him the best and be sincere about it. But I can get on a rant about society too, not just bow hunting. I can get around about society and how we're going down the toilet. But we're seeing the same thing in bow hunting. It's just a joke. It's not even bow hunting anymore.
Okay, I got another question.
I hope it's as good as that one.
It's not quite that good. All day sits. What's your opinion on them? Do you hunt all day? Or what are some pros and cons of hunting all day? And do you see the much talked about midday deer movement during the rut?
I very seldom hunt all day one of the main reasons I got so much going on in my life. If I sit in the tree all day, by the time I get home, I'm so behind on everything.
You can't wait that long to go to the bathroom.
I just go out of my tree, so I don't worry about that. But I'm not a real patient person either. I mean, I can sit in my stand till 11 o'clock or whatever, but I know there's some deer movement. But I'll tell you one thing the trail cameras have shown me. When it comes to really big mature deer, there is some daylight or some midday movement, don't get me wrong, but there's not as much as what you're led to believe.
So do you think walking out after a morning hunt and then walking back in for the evening hunt will put more pressure on than just for if you have time to hunt the whole day. Is that a benefit, less pressure?
It can be, but access is everything for a tree stand. If you've got good access, then it shouldn't be that big a deal. If you've got poor access, you better limit the number of times you hunt a stand, and when you do hunt it, you are better off to stay all day.
I got one more question regarding minerals and nutrients. Is it possible to gain a healthy deer herd or give them the minerals and nutrients they need strictly from a bag with no food plot program, or is that just wasting your money if you don't have quality food plots?
You mean a complete feed or just a mineral?
Your mineral and your complete feed, yes.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but you got to realize that a deer, say you're only providing them a feed and a feeder and mineral on the ground or whatever, they're going to eat a whole lot more than just what's in that feeder. They're going to browse different plant species and that. I think the key is diversity of the food that you offer your deer, not just food plots. I'm a fan of supplemental feeding, mast trees. On my farm, I've got, all these different species of mass-producing trees, apples, crab apples, pears, persimmons, chestnuts, just on and on and on, that a deer can't find anywhere else in the neighborhood. And I think a feeder only is better than nothing, but I would do everything I could to have food plots as well.
In one of the episodes we had Dr. Strickland on, I remember him talking about one of the test sites they had down at Mississippi State. They had all these different lush food plots. And one of the observation places that they had, they had everything, looked like a golf course, right? The deer come out and they're eating some briar over on the edge of the woods. And they're like, why with all of these choices are you eating something over there? So they go over and they do a tissue analysis of that briar, and it was high in magnesium, calcium, something that nothing on his food plot had. So that deer is going to go where what would you call it? You call it the missing link, basically.
Yeah, the weakest link.
They're going to go find that. What your goal as a land manager is don't have everything on there. So having brassicas, having clovers, corn, beans, mash, fruit trees, supplemental feeding, mineral. Why do we want to give an excuse for a deer to go to the neighbor's ridge to eat out of his clover because I don't have something there? You know what I mean? I want to give them everything possible on my place. So you're not going to keep them there all the time, but I don't want to give them a reason to leave. One of the things while we're waiting for the next question that he just brought up about all-day sits that we've never talked about on this podcast, and it might be a good late-season discussion, but one of the things that you've done and talked about indirectly on the podcast is changing which stand scenario you're hunting during the rut based on morning and evening anyway. So when you say you're not setting in the stand all day, a lot of that might be because you're changing the spot that you want to hunt from a morning to a night versus like the male stand is a great morning spot. But in the evening during the rut, you're shifting to the smoky blind, which how far are they apart?
300 yards?
300 yards, but it's where you're setting based on the time of day. So he might only be gone out for an hour, but a lot of that's because you're changing where you want to hunt. We haven't talked about that too much on here.
Go
ahead.
First of all, thank you guys for coming up here and doing the seminar. My name's Gerald. I live a couple miles north of here. And what is your opinion on cover versus food? If you have, let's say, just 100 acres, how much are you going to put in cover and how much are you going to put in food?
Well, there's no set answer because it depends on the area. So when I go to consult on a property, as I'm driving to that property, I'm looking around the countryside and I'm seeing what's the weakest link. Is there food everywhere and very little cover, which is the area where I live? If you got cover, you're going to have the deer. Or is it, an area that's nothing but woods? Food is going to be the key. So I'm always looking for that weakest link. With that said, it goes back to mature buck's number one desire is freedom of human intrusion. We got to get that buck bedded on your property. More than anything else, we got to get him bedded there. So we can't neglect the bedding cover no matter where it's at. We got to have a sanctuary. It's got to be full of prime bedding cover, and we got to stay out of it. So if I had to choose between the two, cover would win every time because I want that buck bedded on me. He can wait till it's dark and he can stand up and he can walk a mile to go eat and then be back before the sun's up. But when the sun's up, he wants to stick his head in some place where he doesn't expect a human to see him.
Question is, if we have beans during the summer, most likely the bucks are going to leave come fall. What is to up your odds of keeping those bucks around? Is there anything you can do or are they going to leave no matter what?
Well, in the summer, those bucks are in a bachelor group. And about the time they shed velvet, those bachelor groups break up and they disperse. I don't know the situation right here all that well, but where I'm at, roughly when I find these bachelor groups and they're in the same place every summer. I go out and I tie my trail cameras to the same tree every stinking summer because them deer are right there. They come back. But come fall, they disperse. And what I've seen up there is about 50% of a bachelor group is going to disperse from that area. And about 50% of them are going to stay right there close.
Does that have anything to do with maturity, with how old one buck is towards the other one?
Very little, because once a deer has developed a pattern, an annual pattern of where he's going to live, he pretty much sticks with it. The one exception that I've seen, and it's happened on my place, it happened last year. There's a buck that, what was the 5x6, 7 last year? I think it was 7 last year.
Yes.
He was 7.5. This buck he never summers on my place. He summers about a mile away in a bachelor group. Every year, when that bachelor group would break up, he would show up on my farm. I'd get the first pictures in mid-October. Around the 15th or 16th, you could mark it on the calendar. It wasn't the 10th, it wasn't the 20th. Around the 15th or 16th, that deer showed up. But last year, and I think it's because I've got so many bucks on my place, last year he was 7.5, so he was up there. He did not show up on my place until December 3rd, and the rut was over. He came because of the food I had. This year, that buck is still alive right now. This year, he has not showed up yet, and it's December 10th. And I just checked a bunch of cameras yesterday to see if he had. He's not there yet, and I think it's because of the weather. He changed his pattern as he aged, and I think the reason that he changed is because I've got a bunch of 4-year-old deer on my place, really aggressive bucks that are as big as he is and younger. I think they could kick his butt, and he don't want his butt kicked during the rut, so he stays away. But in late winter, when he gets hungry, he comes back.
It also has to do with if another buck pushes them out.
Well, I think it's possibly, but I think it's got a lot more to do with the social structure of the herd. I mean, I've got bucks piled on my place because it's the safest place in the whole township for them to be, and I never go in there and bump them out. And I think there's so many of them, it puts social stress, and some of them just don't handle it. Some of them will stay there and they don't care. They either they're fine with going around getting in fights all the time, or they just avoid the fights or whatever. But they are accepting of that social structure that's on my property. And I think the big key here is that we don't give bucks enough credit for being individuals. If we look across the room at all the different individual people here, we've all got similarities. There's things we've all got in common, but there's also differences with all of us. And you can take 2 bucks on the same property, and those 2 bucks will move from point A to point B in a different way. I can have a camera here, and I can get this buck every time, but I never get the second buck, but I get him on a camera over here. He traverses that property different. And they're way more individual than we give them credit for.
All righty, thank you.
All right, we're going to take one more question. This is going to be the longest podcast in Chasing Giants history, but that's great. Great questions, but this is the last one, and then we're going to get either Wes or Brandon up here. You all can start making your way up as we close it out to close out the night, okay? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Ruben. I'm from Princeton, Kentucky, about an hour and a half from here. Enjoy being here, and thanks for coming. Enjoy listening to the podcast.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You mentioned numerous times about checking cameras. I was just curious, what time of the day do you recommend, and is there a certain weather that you look for? Just curious on that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I do it in the middle of the day. I don't check my cameras all that often. I'm probably on average, I check a camera about once a month. And, you know, I've heard guys talk about checking them in the rain, and I tried that for a while, but Ron Slifer with his bloodhound kind of taught Terry and I something, that dog can pick up a scent better after it rains, because that moisture, you know, that scent gets on those moisture molecules. So what I like to do is go out on a really windy, in the middle of the day on a really windy day, when there's a lot of stuff moving, trees are blowing, and also a lot of noise. So middle of the day, windy days.
Up in Illinois, honestly, everybody talks about electric bikes. Up in Illinois, that's the biggest tool I have, is not hunting, but checking trail cameras on that electric bike, because I won't put a foot on the ground. I'll drive right up to where the camera is, and I'm leaving no scent. Really riding, you know, quiet across the farm, not boogering it up. But that's been, for me, that's been a game changer. But it hasn't been on the hunting side. You know, I ride it some when I go in to hunt, but not often. But going in and checking trail cameras, I can make really quick work of it and not leave any scent behind. So, all right. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody that's here. That was awesome.
It was.
It was
Great
almost
questions.
2 hours of questions that went by really fast. Great crowd. Well, real quick, where are you going to be next week? Michigan, right?
I'm going to be in Michigan, yeah.
Hopefully not in the emergency room.
I hope not.
But you'll be up in Michigan. That won't be a live podcast. That's just a standard seminar that you'll be given there. We do have that information on your social media account right now, so hope everybody from the Michigan area is going to drop in there. But with that, why don't you take us out with our sponsors, and then Brandon and Wes are going to draw names for the door prizes for the people that are here, okay?
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, 360 Blinds, Matthews Archery, Vortex Optics, Quiet Cat, WildlifeFarming.com, and Novix Tree Stands. God bless everyone.